For everyone who's in the building that might know diocesan staff, Simone just did an unauthorized reordination, which I'm going to pretend I didn't hear. Because there's so much tonight to learn about hope. Susan Dawson's life is a master class on how to make real what the community needs. And Reverend Dixon's ministry proves that you can lever the good in people to get them over the walls of division that they have created. And St. James Episcopal Church is where I learned hope. I was 28, I was looking for my way, and I was sent to see Will Spong, who was a professor at the Seminary of the Southwest and a priest. And he said, you need a place where you can serve wholeheartedly. And you need a place, a community where your gifts will be made beautiful. And in that moment, I recognized that Will Spong had spoken my hope. And he said, you are going to go to St. James Episcopal Church and it will be your church. And I showed up on Sunday, and he had not told me that of the 250 people in the room, there would be 10 pale faces like mine. And there is nothing to get you into beginner's mind faster than being in a room with no idea of how you fit in, and the fear that you might offend someone, and the deep desire to belong. And over the coming years, this community taught me how to be with them and how to love with them. And people like Ed and Mary Lou Adams and Reuben and Myra McDaniel and Hortense Lawson, and if I get this list much longer, I'll get in trouble for all the people that I leave out. But these folks loved me into life. And they did so out of a vision of a world in which people could love each other and gather around the table and enjoy each other's gifts wholeheartedly. Because as they said, because we were once excluded, we will exclude no one. And they showed me how to be part of a community that from the moment I entered, I longed for. And these folks had no illusions about how easy their work was going to be. They knew what they were up against. And they were animated by a vision of beloved community that they had heard in the theology of Howard Thurman, that they had heard later in the speeches of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. And it was real for them because of the way they lived it in the community in Austin in ways that made changes and opened doors and created possibility. And I loved being in that church. And a few years later, when Eugene and I were first getting together, he said, I want to come to St. James with you. And I said, I'm not sure I'm ready for that yet. And he said, it's a church, I can come if I want to. And he walked in, and I was sitting on the back row where I sat, and he said, I'm going to be down front. And I said, well, I sit back here. And he said, well, I'll be down front. And I went down there with him, and we sat together, and the next day we got a call from the priest. And he said, some of the elders of the church are wondering if you and Eugene might like to join them for a Bible study. And I said, what's this about? And he said, well, why don't you come see? So Eugene and I joined the elders, and they wanted to know what we were about. What are you guys doing here? What brings you to this church? What are you hoping you're going to find? And they, after we did a little bit of scripture study, informed us what they were about and what they saw that was beautiful, that drew them. And at the end of these 12 weeks of meeting on Sunday mornings, and Eugene would say it was owing largely to his crab cake mimosa brunch that he prepared to mark the end of the Bible study, these folks told us that we were welcome. And a few months later, in a congregational meeting, we brought out a big sign that said that St. James is an inclusive, multicultural community. And this congregation hung that banner outside to let everyone know what we saw, what was becoming real in that building, and what they were invited to be part of. And Reuben McDaniel, not long after that, gave a sermon that will forever stick with me because it was practices of hope for any of us who aspire to build an unlikely collection of people that hang together and love each other. And these were his 3 practices. The first one, he said, was miraculous expectations, not meticulous inspections. If you want to live together with people and show beloved community to the world, you need to be talking over and over again about the beautiful thing that you see. And we're going to hear it in your sermons. And we're going to sing it in the songs and say it in the prayers. And every time we do that, our hope grows. And we are fueled to go out and make it real. The second thing he said was successive approximations. We don't have a vision of exactly what the perfect thing looks like, but we've got a direction to go in. And we're going to try a bunch of experiments. And we're going to have the grace to fail. We're going to mess up. We're going to step on each other's toes, but we're going to keep getting closer, step by step, to the beloved community that we imagine. And the third practice of hope that he offered was respectful interactions. Because that's what it's going to take if we're going to work together with all the difference we bring here, to be around this table with all the diversity that we believe is blessed by God. We are going to have to be paying attention to each other and meeting one another with deep regard. And he said, that is an end in itself. I want to say that what I have learned from St. James is that hope is not optimism. Optimism is pointing the plots on a curve and seeing where things are going, and it looks auspicious and good, so you have a good feeling about it. And I look around today, and most of the dots are going in the wrong direction. So I will tell you, I am not optimistic, and that's why I need hope. Because hope is imagination. Hope is the light that guides us and excites us in a sky that is otherwise empty. Hope is a vision of a more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, that speaks to the deepest parts of us, that harmonizes and pulls them forward. Hope is a future that's worthy of our aspirations, and a future that we want to live in right now. And as John Lewis often said, when people ask him what inspired his activism and his persistence, he said, I've always found it good to live as though the future we believe in had already arrived. That is hope. So, hope is not wishful thinking. It is the unsettling truth that reframes all of our desire. Hope is not work avoidance. It is the irresistible possibility that demands everything we've got. When we hope, we are free to be with others, to be for others, and maybe discover what love really is. When we hope, we can see where the Spirit is moving, and we are invited to follow. Hope cracks through the pavement of our oppressive illusions with shoots of new life. Hope is disruptive, and it threatens the way things are now, and that's why the powers that are invested in what's going on right now want it stopped. And the easiest way to stop hope is through fear and anger that shuts down our imagination. That's why some folks want us scared and angry and really thinking of nothing except staying ahead of each other. Complacency deadens hope, and it leaves us in the status quo with this numbing sense that really all there is scarcity and competition and violence, and we come to take that for granted. We become problem solvers. We work at getting what we want, and we are enraged when we don't have control or when others get in our way. But even when we're too tired and too scared and too furious to hear, hope is still broadcasting. And we can tune up to it anytime we want. And these various ways of tuning in to hope are what I want to call the practices of hope. We all know about meditation and prayer that turn down the static so we can hear the signal. And our sacred scriptures that kindle our imagination with visions of things that are possible, unlikely, beautiful, and compelling. And through these polished lenses, we can see outside of scarcity and competition to grace and justice, to mercy and righteousness. We can see what's trying to happen. These practices are so reliable and so easy to forget that it is very easy for you to tell how much I've been sitting in silence and exactly what I've been streaming, scrolling, and surfing based on how I react to the headlines. Anyone who helps you stick with these practices is your friend. Let me recommend another practice that has fortified my hope. Each of our faiths offers teaching that challenges the assumptions of the culture around us. Countercultural possibilities, Sabbath, detachment from things, loving your enemies, anonymous generosity, stuff that does not make sense to us capitalists, and probably didn't make sense to the people who gave us these scriptures. These countercultural claims, what if we tested them in our own lives? What if we run some small experiments to see if they're really true? For instance, I had a student at the seminary who came in and was very excited about the verse, "Give to everyone who asks of you." She was animated by this possibility from the Sermon on the Mount, and we asked her, "Who are you giving to?" And she said, "Nobody, I'm not giving anything to anybody." We said, "Why not?" She said, "Because if I gave to everyone who asked me, I'd be broke and exhausted, and my parents would be right about me." And I said, "Well, maybe Jesus is just being a little naive here. Why don't we just leave that teaching alone?" And she said, "No, don't take it from me. It is a beautiful possibility that excites me." So she sat there, frustrated for a little bit. And a few minutes later, when the discussion had moved on, she slapped the table and stood up and said, "Ha! It doesn't say money." One of her classmates said, "So what are you going to do?" She goes, "I'm going to try something. This week, I'm going to give my full attention to everyone who's asking." And she went away to conduct this experiment. And as you can imagine, the next time the class met, people wanted to know what had happened. "Did you give them money?" She said, "People aren't asking for money." And she told a story about a girl who had run away from home that she talked to in the 7-Eleven, and a man that she bought a bus ticket for, and someone that she just sat on a curb with for a long time. "Are you going to give people money in the future?" "I don't know," she said. "But now that I am looking into their eyes, I am not afraid to see their need or my own." This is the practice of hope. She took it seriously, and she found a way, with a cost and risk she could manage, to test that possibility in her own life. I see the same thing happening with friends who have stage fright, I was working with a guy on Wall Street who just was not able to explain to people the good work that he was doing in a way that would help his company. And I finally, channeling Will Spong, just asked him, "Why do you want to help these people?" And he said, "Well, I hadn't thought about that. These are important investors. I need to impress them. I need to be credible." And then he realized that as long as he was trying to impress people, he was always going to be anxious. So he just sat until he could figure out, what is the good thing that I'm offering? How am I being helpful? And am I willing to serve these people? And when he did, he was able to speak in a way that moved people, that helped them understand, that helped them find what they needed. And I called him a few years later to check on how he was doing, because I would see him on television and he looked like he was doing fine. And he said, "I miss stage fright." Huh? Yeah, I used to have a good excuse. And now I've just got responsibility. A third small experiment is run by my friend Stephanie Saldana, a novelist who's just written a remarkable book about the stories of people from Syria and Iraq who fled their homes because of war. And in these interviews, people share items that they carry that remind them of their homes. And they share stories of remarkable intimacy. And I said, "Stephanie, how do you win the trust of these people?" And she said, "Stephen, people from those countries are inclined to be trusting. But here's something that I've learned, that if you approach people with no agenda, with no thought of what you might want to get from them, but rather a desire to receive whatever gift they discern you need, they will share with you what nourishes you." The small experiment of imagining that the people that you meet in the course of your daily life have something to offer you and are eager to share it. And it is perhaps the voice of the divine or the hands of love that you are meeting. Now, of course, when people are offering you their gifts, their bread, their bowl, their treasures, you may also see their scars. And in our vulnerability, our egos are defeated and we are opened to hope. So here is another practice of hope. Might we stay with suffering just a little longer? How much of our energy goes into getting away as quickly as we can from that which troubles us and makes us uncomfortable and reminds us that there are things going on in the world that we cannot fix. But if I am willing to stay a bit longer, the suffering of others might connect us in a way that heals me. It is the promise of my scriptures and a countercultural possibility worth testing. There's a challenge here that arises if we decide we are willing to be with suffering. Because suffering triggers empathy, and empathy is risky. Empathy works unreliably, and what we know from studying it is that those of us that are particularly inclined towards empathy are ones who identify most quickly with the pain of people who are like us, and are quickest to judge and demonize the others who we blame for the pain, whether or not they really did anything. Empathy is troublesome in this respect because it feeds into the dynamics of in-group, out-group thinking. It creates more polarization, not out of a lack of empathy, but out of the way we manage empathy, choosing sides with those who are more familiar. So here's another small experiment worth taking. What if we commit to see the humanity in those with whom we disagree? Certainly there is right and wrong. Certainly there are things to be stopped. But when we start to look at people and realize that we are projecting our own shadows onto them as part of the story that we are telling because it is too uncomfortable to see the complexity of it, might we not try some small practice of being with the other? I see something online these days that speaks to this hope. It is okay to be heartbroken for everyone at once. Pray for those who persecute you. Love your enemies. Your compassion raises from the dead. If you're looking forward to a future in which some people just go away, that's not hope. We can use our money, our voices, our bodies, our votes to demand an end to violence without dehumanizing people that are on the other side. In fact, it is the only reliable way to resist evil. And if we practice this in small things, we can build strength for the bigger ones. This crisis that we are living through now, it's another turn in a long, tragic story with more horror and grief than we can imagine. And many of us have friends or family in Israel and Palestine, and every time the news cycle turns, our guts twist more. The media likes to simplify things to keep us hooked. For people with more distance, sympathies are shifting according to the framing of the story. And in the worst cases, people identify with those that they're told or sold are more like them and demonize the others. This agony feeds on reactivity. And it's reactivity that shuts down the imagination and serves the powers that manipulate things to their interests at horrible cost. We just want to stop the slaughter. We just want to get the hostages free. We just want aid to go where it's needed. We just want to disarm terror. The prophet Isaiah and the Psalms promise a future for Israel and the nations with mercy and righteousness, justice and grace. What is trying to happen beneath what keeps happening? Those who live there are already showing us how we might live in that hope in the midst of horror. They're showing us gathering for worship as their circumstances allow, advocating for peace when it's unpopular, sharing and caring across every line that the powers draw. For those of us who are here, we might try this. As you have grace to do it, invite your friends on the other side to share their suffering. Be with them in their grief. Pray for them and the ones they love. Simply be present. Not all of us can do this. But if you have that gift, risk it. If you can bear living in the hope of the promised peace, you will yourself be wiser and more inspired and more hopeful. The wider world counts on us, people of faith, to be the stewards of hope. And moments like these that we're living through expose the ground of our hope, the foundations, and in some cases, the shallowness of it. They demand that we reach deeper into our scriptures, into our traditions, to find things that we haven't seen before, maybe that we've forgotten. Things that have been left us by people who lived through times that were surely even more challenging and discouraging and difficult and limited than the ones we experience. What we discover is that if we reach beyond what is humanly possible, we will find something that is divine. Hope is a vision, and whether yours is revolutionary or whether it is still and small, if we practice silence, if we practice the scripture immersion, if we practice reclaiming our shadows in small ways and practice being with suffering, if we practice countercultural possibilities in whatever way we have courage and ability to do so, then hope will sneak up on us. Something beautiful, a future that will claim our hearts. Something that we will say yes to before we even count the cost. Like falling in love. And with practice, we can make real in our habits something that gives shape to our whole lives. A short story from the little congregation where I serve. I'm only there a few days a month. That's the arrangement that the diocese has. And I love being there. And they said to me, we need you here on Tuesday night for the pancake supper before Ash Wednesday. I said, y'all can handle that. They said, no, we need you here. We need you here. It is important that you see what's going on. So I came on Tuesday night. It was 4:45. The senior warden is there. We've got all of the griddles plugged in. He said, people will be here at 5 o'clock for pancakes. I said, Roger, they will not. Give them 15 minutes to get here from work. Come on, let's make the pancakes. And the moment we turned on the griddles, all the electricity in the church went out. Roger went out with a butter knife and started messing around with the fuse box. I was looking under the counter for more outlets. Eventually, we get a few griddles working. We're making pancakes, and at 5 o'clock, there are 10 people in line, and I don't recognize 5 of them. Who are those folks? Oh, she left the church because she got mad at the priest. He's been wanting to come. These are friends of so-and-so's from over in LaGrange. And then more folks come in, folks from the Methodist church in LaGrange, with a guy they just met on the sidewalk. And another guy, kind of scary, comes up alongside me and says, Father, would I be welcome at your church? I said, you most certainly would. Can I bring my husband? Why, you certainly can. I don't want to make people uncomfortable. The only way you're going to make us uncomfortable, brother, is if you are scared to come to our church. And now there's 45 people there. And Roger, the senior warden, is very, very excited. And he said, did I tell you about the folks from the AA meeting that meet in this parish hall? 2 of them have fallen in love and they want to get married out under the big oak tree out in the churchyard. I said, that's great. When do they want to do that? They'll be here in about 15 minutes. And there a man and a woman come in cowboy finery and starched white shirts and creased denim. And they said, do we smell pancakes and sausage? And before too long, the wedding party is merging with the church party. And the church party takes chairs out to set up for the wedding. And there are twinkly lights in all of the trees that our kids put up. And I'm so excited that I spill an entire grease trap all over the kitchen floor. And I get down as my representing the Church Insurance Corporation and start wiping up all of this grease. And everyone's taking pictures. What's this? We just never seen a priest clean up the grease in the kitchen. Well, who do you think is going to do it? And then the cowboy wedding people come in with mops and buckets, and they start cleaning up the kitchen. And then they start doing the dishes. And Roger is crying. And he said, Stephen, do you see? Do you see? This is what we imagined. This is the community we've imagined. And it's going to happen. And it's going to happen here. And we wanted you to see it too. I act the real opportunity at this moment in history when we need imagination to fuel the good work that the Spirit gives us to do is what distinguishes our faiths from each other. What is unique to each of our traditions? The Torah, the covenant, the promised land, the empty tomb, Buddha nature. All of these things that are different emphases, different experiences of the divine. The real opportunity is to learn from them and to discover in the full wealth of our experience, to imagine together beyond common denominators, to fresh vision that offers our suffering world life-giving hope. And what we show each other, what we are willing to see, will stretch us and maybe break us open. And that will prove to the wider world that our hope is true and make us a sign.